The grand champion hauls Andy Capp, 5 times winner, with ROM title. It was in 1971, Enrique Morfin, from Mexico, would leave a great mark in the history of the American Pit Bull Terrier. He bought a dog from Maurice Carver's renowned kennel. The dog's name was Andy Capp de Carver. He is the son of the famous dog Zeke de Jerome Hernandez, Klaus, a hard-mouthed fighter, winner of 5 official fights. He was mainly remembered for his combat victory over Kinard's bow. Although Carver's Andy Capp had lost a fight, he will go down in history, especially as one of the greatest fighters who has ever walked through this land. He scratched 36 times until his death. This dog is the son of the dog Goldy de Carver, Koehler. He was part of a famous litter, composed of the Bolio of the Indian Sunny, the Mendocino of Carver and the Daisy of Koehler. 2 decades later, another Andy Capp would enter the scene. He is a descendant of the same dog family as the first, but this dog would be more threatening. He was a complete arsenal, possessing an incomparable mouth, with a calculating power. He represented the death of 4 out of 5 of his opponents. First fight. Andy Capp of Buffalo Bill and George, against the Hooterville Festo. Males with 17 kilos, referee Cody. Buffalo Bill traveled accompanied by a young dog, he was called Andy Capp, to visit the backyard of Hooterville, with his dog Festus. Literally in your own backyard. This fight brought some of the best dogmen in the South. A long-awaited contest, between 2 exceptional dogs, which exceeded expectations. The Festus of Hooterville was dark suede, with a mask. He was a winner of 2 fights, the 2 fights were in the weight category of 17 kilos. His 2 victims were, the champion Bodacious of Mad Max, he broke up with him in 24 minutes, the other was the Cochiste Much, which he won in 20 minutes. The 2 dogs were the son of Boyle's champion Bolt Action ROM. Festus, a line created in the champion Happy Hand Jack. He was the best 17-puth fighter in the South. And that's why we inherited the title of A Fool and His Money at the beginning of the fight. Andy Capp, a dog with a red head, raised by P. Singletary and R. Boyles. It is the result of a cross of Patrick and Boyles, the 2 most competitive lineages in the world. In the weighing, I almost unchecked the fight, when the dog Andy Capp was weighing 15 kilos and the opponent 17 kilos. The odds of winning were changing tremendously, since the advantage now clearly belonged to the Hooterville camp, their dog, being an experienced fighting pit bull, 3.5 years old, while our dog was a beginner, only 22 months old. In this situation we were in, I began to lose the confidence of our victory. Although our dog had a heavy mouth, it still seemed ridiculous to give up this amount of weight, against a dog like Festus. Everyone knows that a bigger dog can whip a smaller dog. The right thing would be to pay the fine and leave with our dog. For sure, there would be no shame in doing this, because the weight difference was great. But the temptation to whip a dog, at the level of Festus, was tormenting in my mind. I was losing my ability to reason. I finally trusted my partner, I insinuated, to see if we were on the same wave. It was logical that he didn't want us to lose, and especially for me to judge him, for this defeat. Call it blind faith, stupidity, or even ego. But since the beginning of this animal's career, George trusted him so much that he didn't believe that something could beat Andy Capp. And tonight, he was right. Laughter was heard when Andy Capp entered the ring. When the dog Festus entered the ring, a man next to me screamed, calling a bet of $300 to $800. With a broad movement, Hooterville released Festus while the referee shouted, "Let go of your dogs." Festus goes straight through Andy Capp's defense, shooting quickly under him. Festus pushed Andy Capp back into the corner. Festus is pushing hard, desperately trying to put his whole mouth on the Andy Capp, hitting the target partially. In the first minute of the fight, the two were still in the corner. Andy Capp was sitting and the fight was fought. Andy Capp was all bent, with his mouth glued to the snout of Festus. Festus is still trying to fill the bite. With a moan, Festus came out of the bite. Andy Capp was leading Festus through the four walls of the ring, with a bite right in the nose. Andy Capp is in control of the fight. With only 5 minutes of combat, Andy Capp is severely punishing Festus. The Festus at times letting out a moan. Suddenly, Andy Capp shook the Festus with ferocity. Andy Capp seems to be the strongest. At the 7-minute fight mark, Andy Capp came out of the corner. He made a strong bite on Festus' shoulder. He threw Festus on the ground and started working on the bite. Andy Capp was winning the fight. He is burying the bite deeply in the head and shoulders of the dog Festus. Festus is not able to hold him. Andy Capp is feeling that he can hurt him. At 10 minutes of the fight, the creator of the great champion Queen of Hearts made a $100 bet on Andy Capp. No one covered the bet. At the 15-minute mark, the front of Festus is finished. He finds a shape and tries to get up. He bit Andy Capp on the shoulder, but he couldn't hold it. A lot of blood was coming out of his nose. This made it difficult for Festus to breathe, so he couldn't keep the bite. Due to a lot of damage caused by Andy Capp, still at the beginning of the fight, Andy Capp absorbed the aggressiveness of Festus well. He attacked the shoulder deeply, bit his armpits and shook violently. The Festus returns to the ground. This time Andy Capp is determined to end it. He took a bite in his throat and started spinning clockwise, dragging the Festus on the floor of the ring. At 20 minutes of combat, Festus is looking like a slaughtered dog, when suddenly he made a strong bite in Andy Capp's eye. He literally bit even in the bone. The head of Andy Capp began to swell and looked like an English Bull Terrier. The Festus coach began to grumble and remained safe. Andy Capp was surprisingly calm in this strange position while he was studying a way to hit him. Using his front legs, Andy Capp tried to bite Festus, he who was looking willing to die, without releasing Andy Capp. At 23 minutes of combat, Andy Capp managed to let go. He began to punish Festus severely. The fight is at a high pace. At 25 minutes of fighting, Festus makes a turn, when Andy Capp bit the side of his head, while they were breathing. George was encouraging Andy Capp to bite again, in the opponent's throat. When Ronald, who was the creator of Andy Capp, said, "Hey George, come here, leave the dog alone, he can fight against a much better dog, just leave him alone." At 27 minutes of the fight, the Festus will scratch. I was convinced that the dog Festus would not be able to go back to the fight, because even if he wanted to, he would not make it. The referee says, "Face your dogs, free the dogs." Andy Capp's trainer was holding him comfortably in his corner, while Festus took a step. He was looking at Andy Capp, with his chest on the floor. Using his hind legs, Festus begins to propel his body through the ring, gradually gaining speed. The crowd shouted, "Festus beats Andy Capp and his coach in the corner, completing a scratch of a lot of gameness." At 30 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp was on the attack again. He hurts Festus seriously in the throat. The referee said to the opponent, "Get that damn hand out of there." He had his arm in the ring, encouraging Festus when he was being beaten. Dog trainer Andy Capp said, "This won't help you at all." At 34 minutes of fighting, a scratch is made, with Andy Capp to scratch. He scratches hard and begins to get into the rhythm. At 39 minutes of fighting, another scratch was made. Now it is Festus who will scratch. To everyone's astonishment, he made the scratch again. This time Andy Capp met him halfway. They collided like a freight train. Festus simply fell to the ground. At 40 minutes of fighting, Festus is helpless. Andy Capp bites his throat again. Someone yells for Hooterville to take out Festus, who is not defending himself. At 43 minutes of the fight, the Festus coach is losing his posture. Someone yells at him again. "Get him out of here, man. Take it off now." While Festus' body becomes soft and is losing his life. The referee declares Andy Capp the winner in the 43rd minute of the match. Seconds later, Festus somehow gets up and completes a scratch, proving to be a dead game dog, in his courtesy. What drew the most attention in this fight was the intensity that the dog Festus scratched against Andy Capp. You could see in his eyes that he was not scratching by instinct, but with an evil intention in mind. He tried to make his bite, like a kind of crazy dog. It seemed like he was thinking he was winning. He really is a dead game dog. Although this text may seem that the fight was all from Andy Capp, I can assure you that it was not. The credit was certainly of the winner. Andy Capp exhibited his fighting characteristic, proving to be an exemplary dog. At the same time, the determination of Festus drew attention, with an immense heart and a lot of skill. After this fight, the Hooterville team was criticized for leaving the dog in the ring for a long time. I believe that they were thinking that Andy Capp would get tired, or that maybe the mouth of Festus would be able to bring him back to fight. But in that scenario, it would be almost impossible. This fight will go down in history, two hard dogs in a classic fight, using talent and intelligence, constantly trying to overcome their opponent, refusing to give up the fight. Second fight, Andy Capp by Buffalo Bill and George, against Puck's Cake. Males with 17 kilos, referee R.J. Pucks. Bill is a black dog, a dog twice winner of combat. He is of the Smilin' Jack lineage, with the great champion Cherokee Chief. He was 4 kilos overweight. Andy Capp, a once-winning dog, is at the right weight. Bets are being offered, 3 against 1, for the side of the dog Bill. What was difficult to accept, because with this weight difference, the odds were few and we thought about giving up. When it was time to release the dogs, the two shot, they collided right in the center of the ring. The two went to the attack, in search of a favorite blow. The Cake dog jumped and tried to grab Andy Capp. At 4 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp went to defense. He was trying to keep that dog stronger and heavier, away from him. At 6 minutes of the fight, the Cake lifted the back of Andy Capp. He threw Andy Capp to the ground, and tried to bite his neck deeply. Andy Capp, very calmly, held the Cake's jaw and stood up. At 8 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp made an attack on the snout, but he couldn't hold it. The Cake was a long dog. he was pushing the Andy Capp hard, keeping him unbalanced and back. At 10 minutes of combat, Bolo manages to enter the defense of Andy Capp. He threw Andy Capp on the ground, violently and biting his throat. Suddenly he changes the bite, and hits Andy Capp's chest. Andy Capp is on the floor, while the cake was digging deep into his mouth in his chest. He literally slid and bit Andy Capp's paw. He hit Andy Capp hard against the ring wall. Andy Capp, lying on his back, managed to reach a bite, right in the throat of the cake. But he had a hard time staying there. The cake was shaking violently, Andy Capp's shoulder. At 11 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp managed to make a good bite, right in the snout of the cake. When he bit the cake, he began to release the Andy Capp slowly. At 13 minutes of fighting, the cake was very hurt in the mouth, but he was at a high pace of fight, and so far, he is winning Andy Capp. At 14 minutes of the fight, Bolo bit Andy Capp in the shoulder again, and threw him on the ground. Andy Capp quickly let go, and used the support of the corner to get up. At 16 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp began to have throat injuries. So he chose to come face to face with Cake. They began to exchange bites in the shoulder and chest region. Andy Capp wins the exchange. The Cake retreats holding Andy Capp's ear, but ends up giving up his shoulder. At 18 minutes of the fight, Bolo remains on defense. Andy Capp begins to bite deep into the opponent. He is better in the fight. At 19 minutes of fighting, Bolo is biting Andy Capp's ear, when he passed underneath, and hit a bite, right in Bolo's throat and began to bleed. The Cake fought back. He shook Andy Capp hard by the ear, and also managed to pull blood from Andy Capp. At 20 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp at a fast pace, begins to make a style of play, of biting in the head. The Cake trying to push him to the corner. Suddenly, he manages to push Andy Capp. The Cake is still keeping Andy Capp away from him. He was holding Andy Capp's ear. He dragged it to the corner, in order to breathe. Suddenly, Andy Capp regains the energy. He launches an attack, from under the Cake. The Cake took a bite on the shoulder with force, from the dog Andy Capp. Andy Capp opened a tear in Bolo's shoulder. He began to bleed immediately. Everyone knew, Bolo had ruptured an artery. With 21 minutes of fighting, Bolo is a defeated dog. He cries and howls, while Andy Capp bit hard in his throat. At 25 minutes of the fight, a courtesy scratch is made by Andy Capp, and the Cake is removed from the ring by its driver. The Cake, feeling a lot of pain, almost bit its owner, when he went to pick him up in the ring. At 26 minutes of the fight, the Cake is in the middle of the standing ring, and without letting anyone approach him. The Cake started salivating, going into shock, due to a lot of blood lost in the fight. At 27 minutes of the fight, the Cake is taken to his corner. He fell and no longer tried to get up. The winner is announced, Buffalo Bill with Andy Capp and George. The third fight was Andy Capp of Buffalo Bill and George, against the SPK Gunner, also known as Gunner. Males with 16 kilos, the referee is RJSPK's Shotgun. One is a black and white dog, son of Hiklea and Murphy's Boyle's Black Gold Oiler champion. Gunner is the litter brother of the Cherokee Kennels Oiler Jr. Andy Capp is a dog winner of 2 fights, in search of his title of champion. Both dogs are released. Andy Capp immediately put Gunner on defense. With 3 minutes of fighting, Gunner begins to enter the fight, while Andy Capp worked the bite on the opponent's chest. Andy Capp changes the bite to the opponent's throat. He makes a strong bite, and is hurting the Gunner dog a lot. At 8 minutes of fighting, both dogs are in each other's throat. Eventually they change the bite. At 9 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp came out of suffocation. At the 10-minute mark, the two dogs are standing. Andy Capp is biting Gunner's muzzle. At 13 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp drops his nose, and makes a strong attack on Gunner's chest. He dropped the Gunner on the floor, and started working on the bite. With 14 minutes of fighting, Gunner is very hurt in the chest. He's struggling to stand in the ring. At 15 minutes of fighting, a scratch is made, Gunner returns to fight, and the two are at a high pace. Andy Capp made a strong bite in the throat. Gunner starts to bleed a lot. Gunner manages to bite his opponent's throat, and managed to get out of suffocation. At 17 minutes of the fight, Gunner showed a very hard mouth. He bit Andy Capp's knee, and the blood began to leak. At 18 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp made a bite in the opponent's mouth. He took the Gunner out of suffocation. At 19 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp again took a bite in Gunner's throat, while Gunner tried to hold Andy Capp's ear. A scratch is made at the 20-minute mark. Gunner, who is going to scratch, he is in the corner, and when the count reaches 3, he leaves the corner and starts crossing the ring. Andy Capp is released and finds his opponent in the center of the ring. Andy Capp makes a good bite on Gunner's knee. Gunner is starting to growl. He is losing interest in the fight. A scratch was made in the 27th minute of the fight. Andy Capp that will scratch. Andy Capp runs away and makes a strong attack, with Gunner still in his corner. At 32 minutes of the fight, Gunner is down. Andy Capp is biting his throat. Gunner growls a lot. He does everything to get up. Andy Capp throws his body over him. Gunner is very hurt, but somehow, he managed to get up. At 38 minutes of fighting, the two dogs were in the center of the ring, Andy Capp with his mouth full on Gunner's neck. Gunner is standing still, his head is tilted towards the floor of the ring. He seems to be in shock. He begins to fall slowly, when Andy Capp attacks him furiously. Gunner gets up immediately. He is trying to escape from Andy Capp. Gunner is bent in the corner. Andy Capp is still glued to his neck. At 41 minutes of combat, SPK gives up the fight. Buffalo Bill and George winner, champion Andy Capp. His fourth fight was the champion Andy Capp of Buffalo Bill and George, against RC and Dakota of the boy So-So. Males weighing 16 kilos, referee is Big Pete. A while ago, Andy Capp had a fight scheduled with the So-So champion of Warpaint Kennel, which was generated by the Bronco champion of RC and the So-So boy, with a daughter of the champion Magnum of RC and the So-So boy. The fight was unchecked, because Warpaint Kennel's unchecked. After a few months, we received another invitation. This one came from RC and the So-So boys. So, it would be a long and hot trip. It was a distance of more than 1,100 kilometers. The battle would be Andy Capp against Dakota. Dakota is the son of RC and the So-So boys' Magnum champion of Wilkes-Nelly. He is a blood closure. He was generated between a cross-DR champion Jeep with the great female champion Miss Rage. Dakota is a beautiful dog, winner of 2 fights. In a fight, he passed the 1-hour mark in combat. Despite the reputation of Andy Capp, the favorite is Dakota, everyone was betting on him. Champion Andy Capp was 16 kilos, Dakota was 17 kilos. This fight had many dog men. It was a hot night in August at the Cajun country in the United States. The reception was great, the people in this place are very nice, they made us feel at home. When we released the dogs, Andy Capp attacked Dakota's shoulder. He managed to bite hard, so he caused immediate damage. The first 5 minutes of the fight, Dakota is below, Andy Capp is on top and working the bite on Dakota's shoulder. At 7 minutes of the fight, Dakota attacked Andy Capp's head, he was on defense. At 8 minutes of fighting, Dakota is greatly injured in the shoulder. He keeps the defense holding Andy Capp's head, while Andy Capp continues to attack. At 10 minutes of the fight, Dakota came out of the bite, and he managed to bite in the throat, from Andy Capp. Then he quickly changes the attack, and he bites his head again. With 13 minutes of fighting, the two dogs are fighting at a fast pace. Dakota continues to bite his head, he was trying an effective fighting style against Andy Capp. Warpaint Kennels got excited, he yelled at the crowd and at the dog coach Dakota. "Yes, keep going, you can get this one." Dakota, he was a tall, slender dog, he was biting Andy Capp, right in the center of his forehead. He was trying to get out anyway. At 15 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp was thrown on the ground. He got up quickly. He tried to take a bite on Dakota's shoulder, but at the moment he was the target. At 17 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp is starting to attack Dakota's throat. The Andy Capp coach sometimes stopped paying attention to the fight, to talk to Warpaint Kennels. At 18 minutes of fighting, it is very hot, a scratch is made, Dakota who will attack. Dakota leaves the corner and meets Andy Capp, in the center of the ring. Andy Capp takes him back to the corner. A scream is heard from the crowd, "You can't beat this dog," especially scratching against him. At 20 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp tried to hit a bite on Dakota's shoulder, he missed his shoulder, but he bit his paw. He shook Dakota's paw hard, a moan was heard. Dakota's front paw seems to be broken, Andy Capp comes out of this bite and goes back to the throat quickly. A cry was heard from Andy Capp supporters, Ida, Florida. At 23 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp is in a rhythm of fighting, which the dog Dakota is not able to keep up with. A little discussion begins, after the Dakota coach caught behind Andy Capp. The referee did a good job and I calmed down. Dakota is trying to get up, Andy Capp takes a bite in the stomach and squeezes. At 24 minutes of fighting, Dakota cries and begins to urinate, while Andy Capp shakes violently. The Andy Capp coach looked at Warpaint Kennels and smiled, and said, "It looks like Dakota is hurt there." Warpaint Kennels responded by saying, "Yes, he's been hurt before, his dog is not going anywhere." Both continue their wars of words. At 25 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp dropped from his stomach and bit his chest. Dakota tried to get up, but it was difficult, due to the back injured by Andy Capp. At 27 minutes of fighting, a scratch is made, Andy Capp is on the attack, he comes out hard from the corner of the ring, and hits Dakota in his corner. At 28 minutes of fighting, Dakota is in despair, he tries to return to the fighting style he was wearing previously. He bites the top of Andy Capp's head again, but at this point in the fight, he did not have enough strength, nor the will, to be effective in the fight. At 29 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp is working on the bite, on top of Dakota's head. Dakota lets out a loud moan, while his head begins to turn completely red, because of the blood. The crowd of about 200 people released an O-style sound. And the weather got weird. At 30 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp dropped Dakota's head, then the hole in Dakota's skull appeared, some clear fluids began to come out of the hole. A spectator shouted, "Good God all-powerful!" The crowd became restless and began to push each other, to be able to see better. At 31 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp is biting his throat and trying to finish the opponent. While Dakota is in a state of shock, he begins to urinate in the ring. A scratch is made in the 32nd minute of the fight, the Dakota that will attack. He stays in the corner and does not return to fight. Winner of the fight is the dog of Buffalo Bill and George's, the champion Andy Capp. The fifth fight of champion Andy Capp of Buffalo Bill and George, against Jake of Hooterville. Males with 16 kilos, referee Cody. Jake is a dog that is a two-time winner. He is the son of Rocky from Unisecadella Cowboy. He is raised out of line. He's a red dog with a mask. The two dogs are crazy, they are released and Jake attacked in the back of Andy Capp. While Andy Capp looked for his muzzle and managed to catch. In the first minute, Andy Capp made a violent attack on Jake's paw. His paw started to leak blood. At 2 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp dropped Jake's muzzle, and attacked him in the private parts. He even lifted the back of Jake, she was on top when he made this attack. Jake tries to hold Andy Capp, he even managed to bite, but he couldn't hold it. While Andy Capp is violently shaking Jake's back. The dog Andy Capp is seriously hurting Jake, and right now Jake is not able to stop him. At 5 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp came out of Jake's back, and attacked his front. At 10 minutes of fighting, Jake's front is hurt, now he is a totally defeated dog. Andy Capp is biting deep down Jake's throat. At 15 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp is beating Jake, and Jake is in terrible condition. At the 17th minute of the fight, Jake's coach asked for a scratch to continue the fight. The Andy Capp coach refused. At 18 minutes of fighting, Jake is trapped, the two dogs are separated, they are a few meters away, and they are already released quickly. Jake tries to take one more step and falls into the ring. Andy Capp took advantage of the moment and bit Jake's chest hard. At 25 minutes of fighting, Jake is being massacred, he hasn't gotten up since he was released for the last time. At 26 minutes of the fight, Jake is unable to stand, he is holding Andy Capp's jaw and is motionless. At 27 minutes of the fight, the two are in the corner, Andy Capp is trying to get Jake out of his jaw. Jake kept this bite for about 10 minutes. At 36 minutes of fighting, Andy Capp managed to get Jake out, he starts to go forward, trying to get Jake. At 37 minutes of the fight, Jake took Andy Capp's leg, and ended it, he hurt his paw a lot. Jake is firm and surprisingly. He's shaken Andy Capp on the floor. He is close to Andy Capp's eyes, but he has lost control. Andy Capp managed to put himself in a comfortable position. He opened his front legs, defending himself from Jake's bite. While Andy Capp, he is only holding Jake's muzzle, avoiding his attack. Andy Capp is still calm, he makes no effort to get up. He seems to be resting. Jake is trying to attack, but can't get any efficient bites. At 40 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp got up and started dragging Jake through his nose. He would just stop dragging, to shake and drag again. At 42 minutes of the fight, Andy Capp bit Jake's throat again. At 45 minutes of fighting, Jake can't resist, his eyes are turned, he is losing the strength of his hind legs, he started to fall to the ground and tremble. Hooterville gives up the fight. Jake makes a courtesy scratch, and proves his dead game. Winner of the fight, Buffalo Bill and George's dog, Grand Champion Andy Capp. In the words of Art Boyles, Great Champion Andy Capp is by far the most balanced dog he has ever seen. This dog campaigned for a fight throughout the South, winning in 3 different states in a fierce competition. During the fight, Great Champion Andy Capp generated and exhibited some of the most memorable and exciting moments you could expect to see from a dog. In fact, he was remarkable. Open to the world, Great Champion Andy Capp received his title at the age of 3, never exceeding 45 minutes of fighting. Unfortunately, he took the lives of 4 out of 5 of his opponents, without dodging anyone in the process. Extremely intelligent, Great Champion Andy Capp is the kind of dog that if you left the front door open you would have to drag him out and, if it were small enough, he would be a lap dog. This is a very affectionate animal that is always looking for attention, liking people a lot, especially children. It touched everyone. It has already been said that behind every good dog there is a good dog. This is especially true in the case of my great friend George, who believed in the dog Andy Capp from the beginning, always by his side, accompanying him in difficult times. Both the dog and the driver communicated very well, which created an impenetrable bond between the two. The victories of Great Champion Andy Capp are dedicated to all serious dogmen, who are constantly making unforeseen sacrifices, putting everything at risk for the improvement of our dogs. People like you, who laid the foundations, for dogs like Great Champion Andy Capp, as is evident in the great dogs, before him and in the many who will come later. Let's continue to work together to eliminate the bandits and the unprofessional. To make our sport what it once was, and should still be, that it was respectable and competitive. The aforementioned fight reports are not intended to offend any person, nor their dog, and the events stated in the reports occurred as such. This article was written without any derogatory justification in mind. Our only purpose is to share with fraternity our experiences with what we know as a king of 16 kilos. The Great Champion Andy Capp.